housing for people, support for folks who are sick and ailing. You can just begin to imagine the kind of impact it would have in the world and what it would do for evangelism in our efforts to reach people with the good news of the gospel. If by the folks making sure no one had need in the book of Acts drew numbers daily to those who were being saved, imagine what this would mean for the church. So this is no small issue for us to think about. This isn't just next year's budget and making sure your health care is taken care of and that we throw a little money at Disciple Mission Fund. This is a huge issue for the church, and its potential, the potential there to transform the world, is remarkable. Some other facts that you need to know that you will probably find kind of disturbing. At least 1 in 5, that's 20% of all U.S. Christians, literally gives nothing to the church or parachurch or even non-religious organizations in this country. 1 in 5 give nothing to charity whatsoever. In fact, the vast majority of American Christians give very little to the church, parachurch, or non-religious charities as a percentage of income. It's really very small. Another fact that might surprise you is that American Christians do not give their dollars evenly among themselves, but rather a small minority of generous givers contributes most of the total Christian dollars given. If you can sit down with your financial secretary and ask this question, I know what the answer will be. The question is approximately what percentage of people support the majority of the budget of our church? And if you're like most congregations, the number is going to be about 20% of your people underwriting about 80% of your church budget. If you don't know this, this is something you need to know. And statistically, this will work itself out within 5 percentage points in nearly every mainline Protestant congregation. And it's worse for Catholics. Another fact you need to know. Higher income earning American Christians, like Americans generally, give little or no money as a percentage of household income. They don't give any more than lower income earning Christians. The breaking point's about $75,000. Folks who make over $75,000 of gross household annual income actually as a percentage of income give less to the church than those who make less than $75,000 annually. That may be a surprise to you. I think most of us think that our more affluent folk are ponying up the bucks to make the church run, when honestly quite the opposite is true. Another disturbing fact you need to be aware of is that despite the massive growth of real per capita income over the 20th century, the average percentage share of income given by American Christians not only did not grow in proportion, but actually declined slightly during this time. So from just after the First World War, I think the statistics start somewhere around 1918 to 1921. They start gathering the statistics of per capita income. And it begins to skyrocket, especially after the Second World War into the 60s and 70s. There are dips for depression, of course, in the 30s and for several recessions that occur over that period of time. But the per capita income growth is a roller coaster first hill ride up. And per capita giving to charities is a flat line beginning to degrade and begins to really separate itself in the beginning of the 21st century. In the book that you're reading, Why American Christians Don't Give Away More Money, Passing the Plate, they have several hypotheses that I want to be sure that you look at and that we talk about in our mega meeting. Why is it that people don't give? Is it resource constraints? Is it subjective resource constraints? Is it unperceived needs? Do people just not know? Is it normative ignorance? People don't know they're supposed to give. Is it administrative distrust? And yes, the answer is that's a big one. Is it low leadership expectations? Yes, that's another big one. Is it collective action shirking? Do people just not trust that the other person is going to do their share so they don't do theirs based on an assumption that the other person isn't going to pull their part of the freight? Does privatization around money create a problem for us in giving. If you're reading not your parents' offering plate, then you already know the answer to that, and we will discuss that, and I hope you will post on that in the discussion boards, because Cliff Christopher really challenges us on this issue from the norm, because I think you and I both know we'd have a better chance of getting the nuclear launch codes from our financial secretaries than we would what people's giving patterns are and that their habits are, let alone how much they give. But Christopher makes a great case for why that should be different. Does non-routine giving process play a role in why people don't give more? We're going to talk about these, and I want to raise those for you so you know what to be looking for in the reading, and what to be asking about when we come together in our mega meeting. Ultimately, as I said in our first lecture, leadership has to model generosity in order to establish credibility. So what this means is that you as the pastor have to be a leader. You have to be out front, and if you're practicing it, you'll be more comfortable talking about it. But it's not just you, it's your elders as well. The elders in your church need to be encouraged and inspired by you, challenged by the church to be up front in their giving. And not just your elders, but your board. There isn't a nonprofit board in your community that you can join that's not going to give you a pledge card when you become a member and expect you to fill it out and expect to be able to report to the granting agencies that they seek money from and to the agencies in the community that they're seeking to borrow money from, that they have 100% participation from their board in their annual campaign. Well, why would the church be any different? Your church key leaders need to be on board. One of the key people is your treasurer, your financial secretary, your stewardship chair. These folks are key. If they're not leading the way in giving, then the process is going to be flawed and it's going to run into problems. So you just need to understand that those folks need to be on board. And if you're doing an annual campaign where you're asking people individually to share their stories, which I think is important to do, the people you want to ask are the people who are good givers. You don't want to ask a person who makes $400,000 a year and only gives you $20 a month to talk about why giving to the church is important. That's just not the right place to go. So there's another reason for knowing where your givers are in the giving scale, but it's also just it's common sense. You want people who are sold on it, who believe in it, who are passionate about it, to deliver the message that encourages and inspires others to do the same. This leads us to another issue around the budget. Does the church budget practice what you preach? If you are preaching that the church, that the gift to God is the first gift given, it's the first check written in the household, it's the most important thing that you do with the money you have, then does the church practice that as well? Is the first line item in the church budget mission? Does the church have a commitment from its operating receipts that it takes to make the church function on a daily basis, to provide a pastor, to pay for utilities, to cover property expense, to buy Sunday school material? Does it first and foremost out of those funds take 10% or better and give it to mission and make sure that that's the first check written every month? You see, our budgets are moral documents. They reflect our core values. And when we talked about this earlier about how it is for us personally, it is the same for the institution. The church needs to practice what it preaches. And we'll talk about this in the next segment where we deal with best practices in terms of clear-cut things you need to know for your church to succeed. But I'm going to unpack it here now as well, and that's you have to have a clear vision. You have to have a clear mission. People in your church need to know exactly what it is that you do as church. Who are they as church? How do you define your faith community? What's your elevator speech about First Christian Church in Kalamazoo or wherever you're serving, at the corner of Elm and Maple? This is what we do. This is what we believe. Is it succinct enough that you can say it and everybody can say it? You know, most of our vision statements and mission statements are written by preachers. And God, we've never written a word we didn't just fall in love with and couldn't part with. And so our mission statements and vision statements are pages long. At least they're 2 or 3 sentences long. And they need to be one sentence fragment. They need to be one idea, one theme. There's a church in Metro Louisville, Kentucky, whose church, the expression is Kingdom Now. And they define then what Kingdom Now is, but everybody in the church knows their vision is Kingdom Now. The reign of God now present in our midst. And then they talk about it in worship, in discipleship, in service, in mission. But they know who they are. The church I served, our vision statement was connecting people to Jesus Christ. Everybody could remember that if you asked them. And it made sense. It had kind of an emotional connection to it. It was rational. It was credible. It was rooted in our core spiritual values. This is what a mission statement needs to be. And it needs to be credible, not saving the whole world for Jesus. Because, yeah, you know, that's probably not going to happen. Your little congregation of 50 people in Moose Jaw, North Dakota is probably not going to save the whole world for Jesus. So the mission statement ought to make sense, have some rational rootedness to it, but also spiritual rootedness and conviction that inspires and leads and gives you a framework around which everything else you do is hung. And then you see when you build the budget for doing your work in your ministry, you see how it connects and ties back to whatever our vision statement is. It's the core foundational piece. It's the cornerstone of what we do, or the capstone in the arch. It won't stand up without it. And everything that you do as church then should be measured against your vision statement. And if it doesn't fit, then you need to ask yourself, why are we doing it? You look at any social service agency, any group in your church, any nonprofit organization that is successful in raising funds and supporting their work, and they can tell you who they are. And that's how they get people to be a part of it. Because people, when they understand what the game is, what they're being expected to do, if it fits with who they are, then they will sign on for that. And they'll support that if it's something they believe in. It's really important to remember the power of language. Are you funding a budget, or are you resourcing a mission? Boy, those are really different things when you hear them. So often all we talk about is the budget, the budget, the budget. What we really need to be talking about is our mission. The work that God is calling us to do now in this moment, as this community of faith in this time and place. This is what we're doing. And we're providing resources to make that happen. You should have a financial statement at the end of every month, or however frequently your board meets. They should be reviewed regularly, and they shouldn't be listed as profit or loss. They are more than that. You're not in the savings and loan business, and you're not IBM. They are your resources and your investments. The investments are the expense side of the ledger that you're doing to make ministry happen, and the resources is the income side that provides for those ministries to take place. Language is very important. When I was at First Christian Church in Jeffersonville, I will share this story with you just so you understand the power of language. When we were building our facility to expand our campus and do some renovation work, we were very intentional not to call our new building a gym. Right from the very start. Yes, it was going to have those funny lines painted on the floor, and yeah, there was going to be a basketball goal at either end of the large gathering area, but it was going to be more than a gym. I mean, it had a blue seal, fully stainless steel, health department approved kitchen that could serve 300 people. The room itself, while having the basketball accoutrements in it, also could be more dimly lit and was painted nicely in such a way you could have a reception in there or a nice meal and not feel like you were in a gym.